Hello, welcome to my channel, Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and I am doing the Week 11 update for my Read What You Own Platinum Challenge, where I am going to read 100 books that I already own before buying another book. And this challenge will eventually morph into the 500 book challenge, but that's only when I'm done for the first 100. So what have I read in the previous week? The first book was 51. It was an audiobook, Buried in the Sky, the extraordinary story of the Sherpa climbers on K2's Deadliest Day by Peter Zuckerman and Amanda Padoan. Now this book is essentially kind of a knockoff of John Krakauer's Into Thin Air. It is describing a mountain climbing expedition up K2, which isn't as high as Everest, but is technically a more difficult and deadly climb. Now, this book was pretty good because it focused on the Sherpas. Those are the native Nepali people who get all the other people from the rest of the world up to the top of these mountains. So it was good to see the story told from their perspective and how they became climbers or guides to the climbers. The main problem I had with this book is, and this really isn't that much of a criticism, it wasn't as good as Into Thin Air, which Into Thin Air I consider one of the best pieces of nonfiction that I have read. So kind of hard to stand up to that. But as a book on its own, it's a good read. But I don't think I came away understanding that much more than I did from Into Thin Air, except for the fact that you're focusing on the Sherpas, and that climbing mountains is reckless and foolish and incredibly dangerous. The next three books I'm going to sort of list in bulk because they're all connected in a way. And that is 52, A Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. I read the Kindle version. 53, Tarnsman of Gor by John Norman, also a Kindle version. And then 54, Transit to Scorpio by Burt, Akers. These are three science fiction novels in the sword and planet genre, which essentially tell the tale of an Earthman who is taken to another planet, where for a variety of reasons he becomes one of the best warriors on that planet. He also falls in love with a native woman on that planet and must defend her against the bad people on that planet. Now, the first one of this was, of course, A Princess of Mars by Burroughs. That was written around 1912 and is the classic and the standard of the genre. And that is, of course, talking about John Carter going to a Mars. And it is a Mars that is sort of dying. It is a Mars that is somewhat technological in that they had technologies that are not available on Earth, but it's also a little bit a little bit of a fantasy too, because Burroughs just allows John Carter to go to Mars on a whim. Now, I think in later books, maybe it's described a little more. I'm not positive. I think I read The Gods of Mars 20 years ago. I don't remember a thing about it. The second, Tarnsman of Gor by John Norman, is the first book in a notorious series. The first 6 books in this series are fairly standard science fiction, science fantasy, with a little bit of a bent. There are slave girls on this planet, Gor. And according to Norman, the girls like being slave girls. In the first 6 books, it's not that prevalent. It's there in the background. It's after book 7 and onwards that John Norman just goes way off the deep end, and the books become less and less about the Earthman's adventures on Gor and more about how he's going to conquer his slave girl. Well, anyway, those are the future books. The first book is actually pretty good for a science fiction adventure. I actually, as a book, think it's a little better than A Princess of Mars. Sorry, Michael K. Vaughan. It's just a little more exciting and a little more accessible, even though the science in that book is a little flaky as well. He has some aliens in the background called Priest Kings, which you don't get to know in this book. They do feature more heavily in future books, but in this one, they're mysterious figures who take people to and from Gor. And then there is Transit to Scorpio, which follows the same plot line of a man. In this one, his name is Dre Prescott, and he is taken to Arcus, Antares. Oh, I don't even remember the name of the planet right now. But this is it, I just can't. Antares, that is the name of his planet. And he again goes there. He meets a wonderful, beautiful woman who has a lame leg from a riding accident. And he has met these mysterious people called the Venati, and they basically give him immortal life. They say he will live 1,000 years before he has to be renewed. And he renews this girl, her health. And they get mad at him and they send him off planet. And then there's these mysterious beings called the Star Lords, which eventually bring him back. And he goes out and has lots of adventures on the planet and rescues his lady love a number of times. So all these books are related. Again, the science in this one, it'd be hard-pressed to call it science. It's just fantasy, and the author is just pretending that it's science. So out of these 3, I'm going to rank Gor as the best, Burroughs as the second, and Transit to Scorpio as the third, in order of my personal preference. I was going to read a 4th book in the genre. It was either going to be Under the Green Star by Lynn Carter or Jander of Callisto, also by Lynn Carter. But after reading 3 books in this genre back to back, I was full of Sword and Planet. Will I read more? I will probably continue with the Mars, at least the first 3, which continue the story of John Carter. For Gor, I may dip into them again. I read them as a kid. I just don't want to get into that slave girl stuff again. It's not very interesting, but maybe I'll dip into one of the later books just to see if John Norman has mended his ways since Daw Publishing ended it in the 80s and he started writing again somewhere in the 2000s. But who knows? As for the Scorpio books, I have them all in paperback. I have like 32 of them. I am going to read a few more, even though this wasn't my favorite of the 3. For book 55, I read a Kindle book. This was a thriller, Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. On Library Thing, they sort of list this as a horror novel. Maybe. I think it's much more of a thriller than a horror novel. But in this story, you have 2 married gay men going out deliberately to an isolated cabin where you will not have internet or cell phone coverage because they just want to disconnect from the modern world. And they have an 8-year-old adopted Chinese daughter that they bring with them, of course. And to this cabin comes 4 strangers, and they are very peculiar and odd strangers. They're strangers to themselves, but they have a very odd belief about the world coming to the end and how these two gay men and their daughter can help save it. It's a very strange story. And it takes one very stunning twist a little after midway that I was not expecting. And when a novel gives you a very unexpected incident, that's good. It's also good because it's a very tight timeline. There are no breaks. There are no time breaks. The only time break is essentially in the middle of the night when they're all sleeping. And I won't tell you any more details about that, but it has a very peculiar ending, a very ambiguous ending. And I'm trying to decide if I like the ambiguous ending in this case. In a lot of cases, I like ambiguous endings. In this one, yeah, I kind of do and I kind of don't, but you'll have to experience it for yourself. The characterizations, the two gay men are pretty solid. You can really feel for these men. And when the narrator is describing from the 8-year-old girl's point of view, that works remarkably well. And I don't usually like children characters. The four strangers, a little too weak on those, I think, but still for a thriller, it's pretty good. And the last book I tried to read was Hogg by Samuel R. Delany. Now, he is the author of Dahlgren, which is one of my favorite science fiction novels. But this is sort of an experiment in writing that he did in the 60s. It was, how graphic and disturbing can I make a book? And it gets very graphic and very disturbing, but it's also very, very boring. There's so much rape and torture that you can put in a story that makes it interesting. Repeated degradations of people and descriptions of what you can do with your genitals just really isn't all that exciting. So I did this as a DNF at page 103, and that brings me up to 56 books in my 100 book challenge. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading.